Okay, so I'm recording now. Like I said, welcome back. And this is a really interesting week or interesting topic because I'm giving you a PowerPoint on how to give a PowerPoint. This is about how to give a better presentation. So a little disclaimer, I will probably use the word PowerPoint all the time, but this is not necessarily how to use PowerPoint. In your communications courses, you're all in different programs, but you all do kind of common communications courses. You'll learn a little more about how to use Microsoft Office. So this isn't a tutorial or a lesson on how to use actual Microsoft PowerPoint. This is more of a lesson on how to give or create a good quality technical presentation. So this could be on Microsoft PowerPoint. This could be on Google Slides. This, if you're using an Apple computer, I think on Apple they call it Keynote. I haven't used an Apple computer in over a decade. We use Microsoft at work. But so yeah, if you do hear the word PowerPoint, I basically mean any presentation software. I know some of you in your high school before you came to the college might have used Google. I know some teachers at Qatar Foundation, and they use Google Slides all the time. So this is, any way you can make a presentation. These are some tips. So there's only 22 slides, and we'll get started here. Some basic rules. So, okay, in general, when you're giving any technical information, it could be a presentation, you could be writing a paper. I mean, this could even be a math assignment. The colors you choose are really important. There's a reason your instructors don't like you writing a math assignment or physics assignment or, business assignment in, hot pink or bright yellow on white paper. It's tough to see. So I don't have a lot of color choices here, but you can imagine, if you wrote a math assignment, in this text in yellow versus you're going to use a nice dark blue pen. This is called contrast. And contrast is a really important concept for a technical presentation. Or I guess I say technical, I mean any type of presentation. It's the way the words kind of jump, the way the words appear on the paper, or in this case, what we're going to be talking about is on a screen typically, so a projection. Contrast is typically something dark on a light background, or something light on a or something dark on a light background, or light on a dark background. It's hard to wrap my head around this morning. So contrast, definitely an important concept. So we'll kind of talk about this a few times over this presentation. But typically, for a projection, which is how you guys would be giving a presentation at the college, you could use, this is just an option, but you could use light text on a semi-dark background. Now, I want you to think about back before a year ago, back before coronavirus and COVID times, when things were a bit more normal. I know for me, I used to go to the movie theaters all the time. And I want you to think about seeing a movie in the theater. So you're sitting in a dark room, there's a gigantic projection on a gigantic screen in front of you, and think about the credits at the end of the movie. So, at the end of the movie, when everything's finished and they show the director, the editor, the actors, it's typically a black background with white text. I think the thousands of movies and TV shows I've seen over the years, it's typically black background, white text. And that's traditional because it shows up so well on projection. That obviously would not work very well for print, right? You would never hand in an assignment on black paper with white text that you printed. It would look horrible. But for projection, anything on a screen, light text on a dark background does stand out because your eye, you're sitting in a dark room, your eye is attracted to the light on that screen. This is obviously just a suggestion. This is not the rule of PowerPoint. I know personally, I didn't make these slides. We use the same slides in all of the SD sections. There's 6 of them. So I know for my personal slides, I typically use a white background with dark text because then I can print it. So, for a presentation, you always have to think about the context, the situation for that presentation. Are you going to be printing it? This slide that you're looking at here would not print very well. Whereas if I showed you, I'm going to open up an actual PowerPoint here. Let me just pick, sorry, I have it open, just give me 1 second. So like this slide, let me share my screen. Okay, so this is a slide of, well, actually, this is funny. It's some slides that we're working on, just, for communications. And this is actually a slide about speaking in the workplace. And this is typically how I would make a slide so I could print it. So I'm not saying, like, basically what I'm saying is you don't always have to use light text on a dark background. It's kind of whatever the context of your presentation is. Okay, so, these are just some general tips. But one thing that's really important is that no matter what you do, if you have dark background with light text or light background with dark text, keep the background simple. Okay, and I hope you know what I mean by background. I mean like the color of the slide. Stick with a single background. Don't make it this, complicated pattern, or I've seen people have slides with like an image in the back. Don't do that. The background is literally the stage of your information. So you want to keep it as simple as possible. And there's like a theme here. The theme for giving a good presentation is, you don't want your slides, I don't want the image on the screen to distract from my presentation. That's like the key. The presentation is extra. It's something to help guide the users through your presentation. It keeps you on track. You can use it to show graphics, images, and charts, but you don't want to be distracting the user. I mean, you can imagine if I gave a presentation where on the screen was a YouTube video of like, cats running around or cars racing in the desert, and I'm trying to talk about climate change or the efficiency of a hydrogen fuel cell. You really want to keep your presentation simple. So on that note, don't try to dazzle the audience with graphics or style. Use your information to impress them. And there's an important little 2 comments on the bottom. The medium isn't the message. You're not trying to blow them away with this, epic PowerPoint. You're not trying to distract them with the PowerPoint. You're trying to get them to learn your message. Again, you could be presenting about financial security. You could be presenting about X-ray technology and, modern X-ray equipment, whatever program you're in. The information you're giving is the message. So when I say don't try to dazzle the audience. What I mean by the word dazzle is like, well, distract them or impress them. Your presentation is the medium, meaning the way you're going to deliver some of the text or images, but the information is what's important. So again, we're going to kind of go over some tips to make sure your slides are not distracting, but effective. So one of the ways, or one of the, I guess, the unwritten rules of a PowerPoint presentation is, well, one, you typically use bullet points. I would assume that's where the name PowerPoint comes from. The text on the slide is short bullet points, but one of the key tips is, or one of the unwritten rules is we typically don't center bullet points. I've never, out of the hundreds of presentations I've seen, have ever seen the bullet points centered in the document. Now, what do I mean by centered? Well, if you're writing on Microsoft Word or something like that, you can align the text, line the text up on the left, right, or center. So, typically in an English paper, you would align words on the left. If you're writing in Arabic, you might align them on the right. But, we don't want to align the points in the center. What happens is it makes the text look ragged, meaning it's just not lined up properly, which makes it a little more difficult to read and follow with your eyes. So, and there's kind of, I guess, like a psychological theory behind this as well. Hold on, let me just see something. Yeah, okay, let me go to this slide. So again, we don't like, these are bullet points that are centered. It just looks a little odd, and it's kind of weird to read and follow with your eyes. This is typically what you would do for a PowerPoint in English, of course. If you were writing in Arabic, you would align them to the right. But there's like a psychological theory here that when people, again, this is in an English written, or a document written in English, when you read a document, you tend to scan a piece of paper in an F-shaped pattern. So what that means is, and let me actually clear the screen, is typically you will scroll or read a page downwards first. You start at the top and you read to the bottom. Again, this is in the English language. When you're at the top and you start to look down the page, you start to look left to right as well. So the first thing I would read on this page is the title, and then I would go left to right. I would read the balance, and then I would go left to right again. So the reason we align the points all on the left is that's the way your eyes kind of travel down the page. And when I say points or bullets, by the way, I mean these things. So my eye, there's my eye. I'm looking from left to right. That's a really scary looking eye, isn't it? I'm sorry about that. But I tend to look left to right. I start from the top, I work my way to the bottom. So I'm reading my points in order. So 1, 2, 3. This might sound silly to you, but the way a document is presented can really help a person understand it, read it, make sense of it. Now, obviously, you guys as English as a second language students, some of you might be quite fluent in Arabic. And if this was in Arabic, you would have right justification, but it wouldn't change anything. Justification, sorry about my spelling there. That's an I. You would align it to the right, but everything else would be the same, so it would start on the right, but it would still be neat, easy to follow, points on the right. All right, so there you go. Again, these are just suggestions. I'm not telling you what to do with your PowerPoint. I'm just suggesting some things to do. So now this, okay, speaking of suggestions, this is very, very common sense. If you're going to have an image on your slide, And say this is a detailed image. It might be a graph or a chart that you've made in Excel, or it might be like a diagram. So you can imagine if you were medical science, you might have a diagram of the human heart. If you're in engineering, you might have a diagram of a distillation tower. You know, in business, you might have a schematic, or IT, you might have a schematic of a computer network. And you know, the people need to see the details. A really good way to show graphics, oops, sorry, I gotta get my pen, is to keep them centered and big. Okay, now this is a situation where I wouldn't have really any text on the slide. I would keep, you know, the image huge, keep it in the center. You know, there's no point in drawing this woman over here and leaving all of the space on the left empty. Use all of the real estate on your slide. They call it real estate. It means like the space on your slide. So if you're trying to show off a large image, use all of the space you can. Keep it centered, use it, you know, use a big giant image. Now, there is exceptions to that, and I know this is something I do a lot with my personal notes. Sometimes the image I'm showing isn't a, you know, a big detailed diagram. It might just be an image for reference. So instead of a diagram of a distillation tower, you know, I'm talking to the engineering students here, I just might want to show a picture of an engine of a distillation tower. Or if I'm, you know, in business and I'm talking about Qatar National Bank, maybe I just want to show an image of Qatar National Bank. I don't need to show anything detailed. Well, you can still show an image with lots of text, but make sure there's some kind of, I want to say, rule or rhyme or reason to your slide. So again, think about how the person scans the page. You can put the image on the left or the right, but keep your text aligned vertically. Okay, so you can place the graphic off the center. This will give you more room for text. This is a very well balanced slide. It's definitely more pleasing to the eye than, say, having the words all around the image, you know, words above the image, words below the image. And left placement leads the eye to the, sorry, if you put the text on the left, it would lead the eye to the text. If you put the image on the left, it would lead the eye to the image. So you can put the image on the left or the right. Again, it kind of depends on what you want them to see first. Always assume that in an English presentation that they will look from top to bottom, left to right. Again, I'm getting a little like kind of like we're getting into like psychology here or something, but it's, you know, the key to this is just kind of keep your presentations simple, keep them organized, and try to, yeah, again, the key is don't make them too distracting. So this is a type that I use a lot, and you can see it here. Let me share my screen again, or another screen. Right, so like this image, if you can look at this slide, this image is obviously not important. Like it's not a chart or a diagram, but it is relevant because this is a slide about how to speak in the workplace. That's the title of this, Speaking in the Workplace. This is a set of notes for a communications course. You guys will do this later, I guess, in one of your communications courses. So I have an image on the left, I have the text on the right, but you can see it's very organized. It's easy to follow. There's no words everywhere. Like there's some examples later on I'll show you of like bad ones, like this one, right? Where I put the text over the image, right? This is a bad slide. I'm putting text on top of an image of a car. I mean, it's hard to read. It's not pleasant to look at. So it's, you know, nice to keep things organized. All right, back to the slides. Excuse me. Okay, capitalization. So there's a lot of information on this slide, but really there's only, there's two big things that I'll mention. One, avoid all caps in any formal or even informal email that you're sending to the college, or presentation you're giving at the college, or assignment you're giving at the college. I've noticed sometimes I'll get like an email or students will write me something and they use all capital letters. That is a gigantic no-no. Do not use all caps. There are exceptions to this in the sense that you could use all capital letters for a title, but it's certainly not something you would use in the body of an email or the body of a slide. Typically, when you're writing bullet points on a slide, you follow your normal English grammar rules. You capitalize the first letter of the word. You always obviously capitalize pronouns. So if you were writing someone's name like Mark or Mohammed or Sarah, you would capitalize that letter. That's basically the only thing from this slide. This first capitalized all letters, this is good for a title. Oops, boop, boop. And this is good for the body. All right, you guys might be wondering too, like, what do I mean by title and what do I mean by body? Well, I'll show you that on the next slide, actually. Let me clear my writing. I probably should have started with this or mentioned this earlier, but this is your slide title, and this is your slide body. Okay, so your title, you can use interesting colors. You can use all capitals if you want. Like the title is a little bit kind of up to you. But your body, you want to kind of write it using your standard English rules. So capitalize the first letter, capitalize any pronouns. The other thing you want to consider is, and I know that, I've been teaching here for 8 or 9, well, I guess 8 years. I've seen some pretty crazy things in assignments with fonts and typefaces. Try to use familiar, or what I would call classic fonts. Don't use gimmicky fonts. Now, I don't know if you know what I mean by the word gimmick. A gimmick is like something that's stylish but not important. You could say all style, no substance. Like a gimmick is like a trick, or I don't know really how to word it, but these are silly fonts that don't serve any purpose. They're not professional. I'll show you some examples of some silly fonts in a minute. Don't use different font sizes and types as well. Keep it simple. Use 1 or 2 fonts. And when I say font, I mean like Arial or Times New Roman or Calibri or Helvetica. Just pick 1 or 2 fonts and stick with them. Keep the sizes and types consistent, and again, do not use all caps. This, again, I didn't create these slides. I don't really know why that's here. Serif and sans serif are terms used in typology or typography, that, kind of like the theory or the concept of fonts themselves. Serif just means fonts that have like kind of curvy bits at the end of the letters, and sans serif means that they don't. I don't know why that's there, so you can ignore that. But yeah, so pick 1 or 2 familiar fonts. Make sure they're not, cartoonish. Keep the same sizes and types. Keep them consistent, and don't use all caps. So what do I mean by some silly fonts? Well, let's go back to, I'll pick another slide. Let's look at this one. So this is another communications slide here about the writing process. So what do I mean by like gimmicky fonts? Well, I can change my font here by highlighting my words and picking whatever letters or whatever font I want. So some classic ones would be like Calibri or Calibri Light, Arial, right? Look at that one. That's very classic. That would be what they would call a sans serif font. One of the most classic ones, I mean, this is what I used to use when I was in high school. This is probably 100 years old or something. Times New Roman. Okay, that's a nice looking font. But then you can get some real silly ones like, well, I mean, this would be a gimmicky font. You know, I'm not saying it's bad, but this is like something you would use on a wedding invitation or a poster advertising something around the college. This isn't what you would give in a formal technical presentation. Comic Sans is another one, right? That's a big no-no. I wouldn't use Comic Sans in any situation. If you learn one thing from me today is don't use Comic Sans ever. Look at this one. I mean, this is a pretty font. It's called Brush Script. It's a handwritten type of font, but you know, it doesn't really serve the purpose of the slide. This would be very hard to read from the back of a classroom. Also, you have to remember that some people never learned how to write like this. This is, you know, what we would call cursive. I had to learn how to write cursive when I was younger, but not everybody learns that these days, especially English as second language. So you might want to stick with a classic font. Arial, Calibri, can't go wrong. All right, cool. I mean, again, this is up to you. You are the ones that are going to be designing your slides, but I mean, just the rule is you don't want to distract the user or the viewer from your message. So I wouldn't avoid anything like this. Again, this is like something I would put on like the top of a wedding invitation or something. All right. Anyways, I'll go back. I should mention too, actually, guys, you know, you might be wondering why you're learning about this. Well, you know, why you're in the college, why would you have to worry about giving presentations? Well, in your communications courses and at the end of your college program, most of you, or sorry, before the end of your college program, most of you will have to give a presentation. It will either be in your communications courses, it could be in your business courses, medical science. I know the engineers have to give a technical presentation at the end called their capstone project. You kind of have to, you know, create a project and present your work to a group of people. So if any of you were wondering why you're doing this, it's really important because you will be giving presentations at some point, which I know isn't everybody's favorite thing, but you know, you'll feel better once it's over. That's how I always look at it when I'm giving a presentation to people and I'm nervous. You'll always feel better when it's over. Okay, we're getting there. There's actually not too much left of this, guys. There's about 10 slides left, and it'll go pretty quick from here. So just a few more things about your fonts. Italics are a little more difficult to read now. Italic or italicized words are good for emphasis on paper. There's nothing wrong with italics, but some fonts and some italics can make them hard to read from the back of a classroom. Bold, however, so bolded fonts or bolded words do stand out. And you could use that for definitions or key terms. I highly recommend using bold when you want a word to stand out. Speaking of words to stand out, make sure you choose the correct font size. And you know, this goes back to any type of information you're presenting. If you're writing a term paper, you're not going to hand it in with size 7 font. And you're certainly not going to hand in a term paper with size like 30 font. And a presentation has kind of similar rules, but obviously presentations are much bigger. You want people to be able to see them from the back. So typically for a presentation, you would use around 30 to 50. It totally depends on, you know, the information, the size of your slide, the size of the screen, but keep your text, you know, large. Can you imagine if this whole presentation was this size 18, you know, it would be so hard to read. Okay. Now, this is a classic. This is like one of the first rules I ever learned when I was making PowerPoints or whatever. I guess I was probably in like grade 11 or maybe grade 10, and we had to, make a presentation. And I'll never forget my instructor or teacher saying, don't put too much text on the page. I think the rule back then, which you still hear today, is you roughly want 6 words per line, 6 lines per slide. And this is just a paragraph, and there's nothing wrong with a paragraph on an essay, but for a PowerPoint, it defeats the purpose of using a presentation program. This looks like a jumble of text. The slides are difficult to read, and then what happens is people in your presentation start reading all, like some of you are probably doing this now. You're reading all of the text and you're not listening. And that's like literally the opposite point of a presentation. I don't want you to be reading the text while I'm speaking. So the text should be more point, point, point. So here's an example of a bad slide. And this slide is bad for at least three reasons. Okay, and this kind of, I just want you to think about what I just said. There's 3 reasons why this slide is bad. Your assignment this week is to tell me or show me 3 examples of a bad slide. So here is a slide that has 3 bad examples on it. The first thing that I notice with this slide is the title is just way too long. Just read that sentence or read the title. Basic rules that you must have to have a good presentation. Way too long for a title. Okay, we could shorten that like way shorter. You could say rules for a good presentation or tips to make a good presentation. Or I think the example we fixed it on the bottom, I have the fixed version here, basic presentation mistakes. Okay, so the title needs to be shortened, way too wordy. Over here, we just have a big paragraph of text. It's really small and there's only 1 point. So that's problem number 2. There's too much text here in one big paragraph. And then problem 3 is what's the purpose of this image? Right? It's a nice image. It's pretty. It's like a little cabin or I guess a big cabin or house in the mountains, and there's the sun. It looks really nice. But what does this have to do with my slide? So there's 3 problems here. Title is too wordy. The body is also too wordy. It's not in point form, and there's an image that has no purpose. So I want to show you the fixed example, but let me read this to you, okay? Because what we're going to do is we're going to take this paragraph and turn it into point form. So let's read the paragraph together. One of the most common mistakes in creating a presentation is to place too much information on the screen. This can cause the reader to become distracted from the speaker, just like you are now. Audiences are much more receptive to the spoken word, and the graphic should match the topic too. So there's like a lot of sentences there that we could break down into points. So first things first, I clean the title. The title is shortened. It's just basic presentation mistakes. The other thing you notice, there's no image here. And I'm not saying you couldn't put an image here, but the image has to be related to the context or the purpose of the slide. And then 3, you'll notice that big paragraph has changed into 3 bullet points. Too much information, the reader will get distracted. Audiences are much more receptive to the spoken word, and only use graphics that support your point. All right, so we have too much information, a pointless image. There's too much on this slide to a very basic slide. And some of you might be thinking, this slide, the one I'm showing you right now, isn't very attractive. I'm not saying you can't have an attractive slide, like a well-designed slide, but you have to remember the point. The point is not to distract the people from you. So again, this isn't the prettiest slide, right? You could make it look a little better, but that's not the point. This slide totally delivers your message. All right. Couple more things. So guys, I'm on slide 16. There's only about 5 or 6 more slides and we're done. So just a couple basic rules here. Keep your slides simple. Use bulleted points to make your slides easy to read. Keep your text easy to understand. You want to think about your audience. If you're giving a technical presentation, or like imagine you're presenting on something in medical science, you want to keep your text easy so all of your audience can understand it. Now, obviously, if you're presenting to doctors and nurses, you can be a bit more complicated. But if you were presenting to your classmates or other instructors from different faculties, you might want to keep the text easy to understand. Use concise wording. What that means is keep it short. So there's like a saying in English sometimes, I don't know if this, sorry, I guess it's not really a saying, but it's the idea of keeping things short, keeping things simple. And that's kind of where your PowerPoint should be. Keep it short, keep it simple. You're going to use bulleted lists because bullets are your focal points. You provide the elaboration. You are the one that's going to be sharing all this information. The slides are only there to kind of help. And then keep your font size large. Don't use tiny, tiny text on a slide because old people like me won't be able to read it. All right, a couple other guidelines. This is okay, you might not understand this right now, but it says use builds, don't give them too much information at once. Now, what that means, or what I mean by that is, don't just put all this information on one slide. Think of your presentation like a technical report or technical paper. Start with an introduction, so you might introduce yourself, introduce the topic, your theses. So, this is a PowerPoint about the fuel efficiency of the diesel engine. Okay, so, give them an introduction. Then your next slides, your next 5, 10 slides, use information, data to support your theses, to support your introductory statement, and then have a slide at the end for conclusion. So kind of like you would write a paper, a PowerPoint is the same thing. You have an introduction, you have your body, you have your conclusion. Your body will make up the majority of your PowerPoint, where you're going to be providing data, research, proof, for your topic statement. Keep it simple. What I mean, and here it says stick with the same transition. I'm not going to get into transitions, but in the PowerPoint software, you can make animations happen when you go from one slide to the next. Keep it simple. Don't use fancy transitions. And if you pick a transition, and again, what I mean is like an animation that happens when you go from one slide to another, keep that transition the same. Feel free to be creative, but you can leave some of the design choices to professionals. And what I mean by that is if you guys are working, at Qatar National Bank, or you're working for Qatar Petroleum, somewhere on that staff, there would be a graphic designer or a technical writer. If, you had to give a presentation to the US Embassy and you wanted to make sure it was perfect, and you were working for, say, Qatar National Bank, you would typically have somebody on a staff, like a professional, to help you design the slide. So, be creative, but don't go too crazy with it. And the general rule of thumb And this has kind of changed, I think, in recent years. I think you can get a bit away with a bit more because now we have widescreen projectors in classrooms. We can use a lot more space, but keep it short. So 6, 8 words per line, 6 to 8 lines per page. Don't use too much information. Let me see if I have an example of that. Of too much information. I might not. I might have closed it. Yeah, okay. So here, let me show you a picture here of something I have open. We're almost done. Screen share. So like now this is not part of your course. This is part of a communications course. But look at this slide. Okay. It's not good. You have way too many words. Oh, I can't write on it. My pen doesn't work for PowerPoint today, but there's way too many words. So this is not a good example of a good example of a slide. This is a bad example of a slide as well. It's just too much information here. Okay, so this would be a lot simpler. All right. Let me share my screen again. Okay, choosing a color scheme. So stick with the PowerPoint defaults. I'll show you what I mean by that in a minute. Always consider what might look good on your computer, maybe unreadable in the classroom. And remember to use strong contrasting colors. So what do I mean by stick with the PowerPoint defaults? Well, I'm going to go back to PowerPoint again. New share. So guys, when you open a PowerPoint and there's nothing there, this is what you see. So you have title, you have subtitle. Oops. I can make a new one. Here I have title. Oh, I can't type. Here I have body. Okay, but maybe I want to make this look a little better. Maybe I want some sort of theme here. Oh, I got a really good question in the chat. Okay, I'll get to that in a minute. Really good question. I've never had that question before. Okay, cool. All right, hold on 1 second. I like it. So okay, maybe this is your PowerPoint. You have a title, subtitle, title in your body, and excuse me, you want to make it look a little different. Well, on the very top of the screen, there's a design tab, and the design tab can create a design for you. Now, these are this is an older version of PowerPoint. If you guys are using Office 365, you can get some really cool themes in here. But yeah, these are just some examples of themes. Ooh, I don't particularly like this theme, but anyways, these are just some examples of some themes. So, right, this one pretty good, little distracting, but this is a PowerPoint recommended theme. You could get away with this. I would probably make the text a little bigger, but yeah, you basically kind of let PowerPoint help you design your slides. So someone, I think it was Omar in the chat, mentions, what if you are colorblind? That's a really good question that I'm not particularly sure how to answer because I've never had that question before, and it's a really good question. I can give you 2 suggestions for that. I think there might be some computer software out there, like I know in certain video games or certain programs, you can set it to a colorblind mode. And I'm not going to look it up now, but there might be some sort of colorblind mode for Windows. The other suggestion I have is, if you are colorblind, is to get someone to look at it. I'm just going to see. No, okay, I don't see it here. But there might be a colorblind mode for Windows or for iOS or whatever program you're using. But the other suggestion is, if you are colorblind, is get someone else to review your work when you're done. And the beautiful thing about PowerPoint is, if the theme or the colors you picked didn't work, you can easily change them. Oh, I wouldn't use hot pink, I don't think, but yeah, you can pretty easily change them. The other thing about using themes from the designer here in PowerPoint is that they're designed to work. They're pre-made, so they're designed, even if you're colorblind, they're designed with certain colors in mind. So that's just my suggestion. There you go, Omar. I knew you could. So for you people, or you guys who can't see the chat there, Windows 10 does have a colorblind mode in the Windows 10 color settings. I knew that it did. All right. Well, sorry. I was sure that it did. But yeah, thank you. So Windows 10, which is what we have at the college, or what you might be using at home, would have a colorblind mode. But again, you could always ask somebody to look at your slides as well. Okay, we're at the finish line, guys. Just a couple more minutes and we're done. So use contrasting colors, light colors on a dark background, dark colors on a light background. Kind of up to you. For me personally, I use dark colors on a light background for printing, because in a normal class, when I'm not teaching on Zoom, I print my PowerPoints for my students so they can write on them. But it's kind of up to you. Graphics, a few excellent graphics are better than many poor ones. There's a saying that we use quality over quantity. Don't use too many images, keep it simple. Photographs can be very powerful, but use them sparingly. Now, I had a question the other day. What does sparingly mean? Sparingly means with restraint, like a little bit. Just use a few images. Like if you look at this slide, none of these images are really relevant to the slide, especially like this one with the Statue of Liberty lady. This is a snow castle is what it looks like. And, what does this have to do with the image? So, in this particular slide, not a good image. So 2 more slides and I'll show you the assignment, and halas, we are finished. Here is an example of a very bad slide. So this slide is trying to give some information about Martin Luther King Jr., very, very famous religious and civil rights religious leader, civil rights activist, author, poet, minister, everything, very famous American person. And we have a title here that's in like 3 dimensions, and it's shiny and it's orange. We have a slide that has a green background that turns to pink. We have 4 images of Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King. And you'll notice like I have green text with a green background. I mean, this is just a mess of a slide. Why do we need this big flashy title in the middle? Why do we need 4 images of the same person? So what you could do, you could keep the text the same, but have a little bit more restraint in your slides. So, a nice title, Martin Luther King Jr. up at the top. It's not in 3D. We have just the bullets on the left and 1 picture of the man on the right, and that's it. Yeah, as Omar said, this is much more organized. I'm not saying it looks amazing, right? This isn't a work of art, but your slide shouldn't be a work of art. Well, that's a weird thing to say. What I mean is your slide shouldn't be so full of imagery that it's distracting. Okay. So that's it. That's the presentation for this week. So what do you guys have to do for me this week? You have an assignment every week. What do you guys have to do? Well, it's a very easy assignment. Yesterday I gave it, I told the other students what the assignment was, and within about an hour after class, I already had a couple of people submit them. So this is where you can find your assignment. It's also going to be in your course calendar. I have to open that up, but I'll open that up after this class. Your assignment. I'll make this visible for you, or I'll kind of change the dates after class, but here's your assignment here. Again, this is where you read about the assignment. This is the Dropbox. So do this first. All right, so let me read it out to you, explain how it works. It's a pretty simple one. Okay, so your job for this assignment, I want you guys to, am I sharing the right screen? Yes. I want you guys to create a PowerPoint that has 7 total slides. Slide number 1 is the title. You can give the title. Oh, now I'm going to scroll down for 1 second. I'm just going to zoom in. There we go. Sorry, I'm just organizing my slides so I can like see what I'm writing here. Sorry about that. Okay, sorry. So slide 1 is your title. You can call it Better Presentations. I need your name and student number. So there you go. That's it. You get a mark for that. Now, the next 2 slides, you're going to do this 3 times. I want you on slide number 2 to give me one example of what not to do in PowerPoint. So tell me something that you don't do in PowerPoint and show me an example, and then fix that example. Okay, and you'll do that 3 times. And that's it. 7 slides. So again, let me just say that one more time. I want you to give me a title slide, so call it Better Presentations and put your name and student number on it. Slide 2, tell me something you should not do in PowerPoint, like for example, using an irrelevant image, and give me an example. And then on slide 3, fix that example. So show me the better version of that slide. On slide 4, I want you to show me another example of something you shouldn't do in PowerPoint. Maybe it's the title is too long, or light text on a light background. Okay. Then on slide 5, fix that. Show me a better example. And you'll do that 3 times. That's 7 slides total. Save your PowerPoint and put it in the Dropbox. And that's it. And for you guys, that's due Friday at 11:30 p.m. Okay, so really that's it. There's a comment in the chat there, but that's it for this lesson. If you guys have any questions about that, you can let me know. But yeah, that's all you have to do this week. All right, so let me just check the chat here.